Now, Nigeria is supposed to be a tourism haven. So why has it failed so spectacularly to achieve this? Why have beautiful game reserves like the Sambisa Forest been left to rampaging bandits and terrorists who've set up their bases there? In the north, there is the colourful Kano Durbar Festival, the sand dunes of Yobe and the popular game reserve in Bauchi State, not to mention palaces that were built more than 1,000 years ago. In the Middle Belt, the Jos and Mambila plateaus have some of the most beautiful landscapes on earth, a region where tea, apples and strawberries are grown by the local people. In the southwest, southeast and south-south, there are waterfalls, suspended lakes, slavery museums, pre-colonial and colonial-era relics, as well as carnivals, dozens of beaches and tranquil resorts. And there are world-class restaurants and nightclubs blasting out everything from homegrown Afrobeats and highlife music. You can even go whale watching on islands outside Lagos that connect to the Atlantic Ocean. So why, in the face of this enormous potential, does Nigeria's tourism numbers pale in comparison to other African countries such as Ghana, Gambia, Kenya, and South Africa? And how is the Tinubu government planning to restore this wealth-creating potential?
In my ministry, we have committed that we want to have a great expansion economically, whereby we will contribute at least $100 billion to increase the GDP by 2030. And the first step in giving us the ability to do that is to have IP. And also at the same time, we want to look at all the value that Nigerian creatives for music, film, art, and fashion, and our culinary as well, because now wherever you go in the world, people want to eat Nigerian food, and that's a great thing.
Hanatu Musawa. Well, for more on this, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now in the studio by the Minister of Art, Culture, Tourism and the Creative Economy, Barrister Hanatu Musawa. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Tell us first of all about the vulnerabilities that you've found in the tourism sector since you took over that ministry, I think about 4.5 months ago.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show, Mr. Charles, especially to talk about this very important sector. I'm glad that you said vulnerabilities because, of course, when we came on board, there were a lot of areas that I felt were not really nurtured enough. I think the problem in the tourism sector from the beginning is, Nigeria has not really paid enough attention. Government has never really paid enough attention. You speak about the likes of Obudu. We do have so many game reserves all over the country. There are so many sites all over the country, but government has really always put it on the back burner. When I came on board, I found that, there was just nothing. No funding, no investment, and of course, you have the areas of insecurity and certain other, banditry and stuff like that, and lack of just basic infrastructures such as power and access to get to certain sites. So things like that really impeded the growth of tourism. And the other thing was that the domestic tourism that we could have really benefited from as a nation was not really encouraged, from state to state. So these are some of the challenges we found, especially the lack of infrastructure. I mean, if you talk about tourism and you don't have the proper infrastructure in place, then, it's a misoma really. And at the same time, government has never really funded that particular ministry properly. So we're doing a proper assessment of the sector and to see, the best ways that we can really approach a really successful sort of outing for the tourism industry. And I think we kind of found a way.
So what is the way?
So the way is when you look at tourism and you look at it what it means in its entirety, which is you want to go to a location, right, that has security, that has that sort of infrastructure. And then you look at Nigeria and you say, no, Nigeria is not a fit for the narrative that we have sold tourism for. But then I looked at what they've done in, for example, Saudi Arabia, and they've driven their tourism policy from the perspective of the destination itself. So when you talk about, for example, Cancun, it's about Cancun. When you talk about Al Ula, it's about Al Ula. And you want to go to Al Ula not because it's Saudi Arabia, you want to go to Al Ula. So I think if we are able to revive some tourist destinations to a global standard, we can drive the conversation of tourism and revive it in Nigeria from the perspective of the tourist sites. If Obudu, for example, was a global standard as it was before, and we're able to sell Obudu internationally and nationally as well, and put all the right infrastructure. So I'm talking about access as well. The airport is there, the roads are there, the power is there, and the resort itself is there. We can, as a nation, and it's not just Obudu, you've got Yankari, you've got Mambila, I mean, all over Tinapa, there are just so many. In fact, in trying to identify 6 or 7 priority destinations, I just couldn't, it took me a while to decide because there's just so many to decide from. But we're starting with Obudu and Yankari, and we're trying to see if we can bring it up to global standards.
So those are low-hanging fruits.
Those are very low-hanging fruits.
But it is a bit worrying
Yeah.
when you look at a place like Obudu, for example, which, as you correctly pointed out, at some point was ascendant and then suddenly collapsed. I mean, during the Donald Duke and Lealie Moke years, particularly during the Donald Duke years, I mean, he did so much there.
Yeah.
The place was built up, there was an airport put in place and so on, but there were so many other things that got in the way of that destination actually taking off.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, you had to have the planes flying to the airport,
Yes.
which was a big challenge. I mean, you're talking about having a destination where you can go to
Yes,
directly. I mean, it's
absolutely.
not an international airport, so you can't fly from abroad into that place.
Yes.
I mean, how do you plan to get around things like
So that's why you have to work with other ministries, such as aviation and interior as well. You know, other ministries, other MDAs. Now, from the very beginning, one of the things that Mr. President said to us was that every single initiative, he wanted it to have a sustainability factor that will outlast the next generation and the next generation. And he felt that the best way we can do that was to do a PPP. Because if you do it with a PPP, then a private entity has a stake. For example, what we're doing in the Wolishorinka Theatre, then it has the best chance of lasting. But government, there's a certain discrepancy in government, especially government coming after government, and we know how it goes when a new government comes. So you have to build these initiatives in a way that will sustain itself. And it's the PPP. And really that's what we're doing, even with the Obudu, even with the Yankari.
So what stage is that PPP
Well, Obudu's
with Obudu and Yankari?
Obudu is still at the early stage because we're still trying to source for funding. A couple of weeks ago, or a couple of, I think, months ago now, I took a memo to the Federal Executive Council, and it was actually 2 memos that were approved. One of them was the Creative Industry and Tourism Infrastructure Corporation, a special purpose vehicle that we hope will attract funding and that will be able to inject into building some of these tourism sites. So we're almost at the final process of putting that framework together. We've been able to leverage some international funding, and we're working together with the state government and then with private entities to see that we can upscale the work in Obudu. Once you have the funding in place, and once we have the right mechanism in place, such as the airport that you spoke of, the access, the water, the power, then it's something that we can upscale. And I do believe that hopefully by next year we will have anyway, by 2027. But I hope by next year we will have Obudu back to its
But I mean,
former
these
glory.
are challenges this country has had for
Yeah.
a very long time. Water,
Yeah.
electricity. I mean, every single government talks
Yes,
about
of course,
electricity
of
and so
course.
on, and it's remained there. So, I mean, I think it's a fairly ambitious thing that you're trying to do there.
I beg to differ. Because my job, thank God, is not to cater to the electricity and water of the whole country. It's to ensure that it is there for those specific sites, tourism sites, and within the creative sector. So that's where I'm going to put my energy in and ensure that when it comes to those destinations, and this is what I've been mandated to do by Mr. President, to ensure that when it comes to those destinations, all the mechanisms that need to be put in place to ensure, because it can't be rocket science that, you know, other countries have electricity and power. So for me is to focus on my area of mandate to ensure that there is electricity and power in those specific destinations and in the creative and the cultural industrial villages that we are creating. Yeah.
I know I'm focusing a lot on tourism, even though you also preside over art, culture and the creative economy.
Yeah.
But all the other sectors, I mean, music, art, movies, they all seem to have forged ahead on their own steam.
Yeah.
But tourism has gone the other way, hasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, and I wonder, in that context, why you've made a very big promise recently in which you pledged that your ministry would add $100 billion.
Yes.
Not 10, not 20, not 100 billion naira,
No.
but $100 billion to
least.
Nigeria's GDP by 2030, which is only 5 years away. I mean, was that a rather sort of
Ambitious?
overly ambitious promise?
I don't think so. I honestly think if you look at the potential in the specific industries that I man over, I don't think so. The creative industry has the kind of potential. You look at other countries, and I came up with that specific target because I did a very academic research and deep dive as to what can come out from this industry. I worked together with the Boston BCG, Boston Consulting Group, to come up with the best potential, how we can hit it. Because Mr. President said to me that he's creating this ministry because he wants it to have a cultural expansion. He wants it to have an economic impact and expansion. And so BCG, we worked together looking at benchmark countries such as South Korea. They were able to do it. So South Korea, Brazil, in all the different countries that were able to really leverage.
But South Korea is pretty much a first world country. I mean, there is no African country that is commensurate with Nigeria in terms of comparison.
But it's not about it being,
you know,
yes,
Kenya or South Africa or whatever, where you've got lots of tourism numbers that's doing $100 billion.
It's not about it being a first world country or not. It may be a first world country, but if you look at in the other way, what Nigeria has to offer, I made that assessment based on the content and the creativity that came out of Nigeria and what the world's interest is in Nigeria now, not because of anything, but because of that content, whether it's through our art, through our artifacts, through our music, through our films. The second largest film industry in the world is Nollywood. So there's a lot of interest there. It's just for government to put that enabling environment, close all those lacunas, put the framework in place, do a proper data mapping that will allow the industry to grow. So that number really came out from a very academic exercise.
Right.
And I feel that we can even do more than that, because now with the tourism industry, which I feel tourism and creative industry and the cultural industry, they not only overlap, they complement each other. So there's a way that you can put that together. And when you talk about tourism as well, we tend to forget the power of domestic tourism. And I think it is also within domestic tourism that we're going to be able to pull some of those numbers.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that was what Cross River State was counting on. That's what Leali Moke really invested in, as well as Donald Duke, to try and attract. And at one stage, they were doing nearly 2 million visitors a year, but that was concentrated around the carnival at Christmas time. The rest of the year, the hotels were pretty much dead. But what I'm wondering is, given the fact that, for example, the music sector, I mean, a lot of people are interested in Nigeria and Afrobeats and all that, but the musicians tend to go abroad to perform internationally and earn money in those countries and for the venues and so on and so forth where the stuff is going on.
And there's a reason for that.
Are you going to be able to reverse that and bring them to Nigeria?
Absolutely. The only reason they do that is because Nigeria, up until now, has never looked at giving them the right infrastructure. For example, you speak about the musicians going abroad to perform. There's not one arena in Nigeria. So I continue to say, if me as a Nigerian wants to listen to Afrobeats, which is quintessentially Nigerian, and you want to hear a Nigerian perform Afrobeats, you in an arena, you've got to go out of the country. So once you put the proper infrastructure in place, and then, like I said, you close the lacunas, the fact that there's no proper IP policy that will protect the industry, things like that, just the proper foundation. And this is why it was very important for Mr. President from the very beginning. He wanted to set up a ministry that would look at this high potential area, and that's what he did. And then in looking at it, I saw that there was just nothing done to support the growth of the industry. So once you put the infrastructure in place, once you get the funding, which we have been able to access through Frexim Bank, and you're able to inject it direct into the industry, you're going to see a huge growth, especially when creatives are given the ability to create, and those superstars that you speak of and other superstars that don't happen to be Nigerian but want to have an experience of being in Nigeria, because now everybody wants to have an experience of being Nigerian through our arts and through our content. Once you put the infrastructure in place, you can see a lot of traffic coming in when it comes, for example.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if everybody wants to have the experience of being Nigerian. I think a lot of people like music, but it doesn't mean they want to move or travel to the country.
They may not want to move to, I mean, you saw what happened in December. People may not want to move to Nigeria, but they want to experience it.
Yeah, that's what they're doing in their countries, or via the internet, which is global.
No, but they don't have to do it through the internet once we put the infrastructure in place.
Right, I understand the point you're making, but how are you going to judge success in that sector? Will it be through a rise in tourism numbers, a rise in revenue from that sector, or what?
So we're doing a proper data mapping. We're launching D30 platform. It has never been done in the industry, and I think it's only the Ministry of Health that is doing it. And we have come up with a framework that will do a proper data analysis of every information that comes forward from in the industry and in the tourism industry as well. By doing that, you allow investors to be well informed. You allow creators to be well informed, and then we're able to distill that information properly to government so that we can really track and trace what numbers the music industry is doing, and we've finished doing that now. So
the problem for you, of course, is that no matter how hard you try, and I can see that you're very passionate about this, unless the government is able to deal with that undercurrent of insecurity, confidence and so on, there's not much you can do to stop tourism from continuing to be choked to death.
I honestly don't agree with you, Mr. Charles. I really don't. I mean, if we looked at it through that spectacle, we would not be able to do anything for tourism. And this is why, as the government is already getting insecurity underway, because the government, this particular government, under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has done an astronomical job at intercepting some of this insecurity. Coming from the Northwest, I could even drive to my state a couple of years ago. But even though it's not a perfect situation now, But we're getting there, and we're getting there. But me, as the Minister of Culture and Tourism, I'm not looking at it like that. What I'm doing is concentrating and putting up the right mechanism that is needed to be in place for the growth of all three industries. That's the culture, the creative industry, and the tourism industry. But then looking at it from the same angle that they did in Mexico with their Cancun, and Bali in Indonesia, and the way they're approaching it in Saudi Arabia with Al Ula, and trying to work on specific sites, and then ensuring that those specific sites or specific destinations have all the protection that is necessary. So when you go to Yankari, or you go to Abudu, or you go to Cocoa Beach, is one of the sites that we're hoping to expand, and in a private PPP partnership. When you go to those sites, you are completely protected. So that's my focus, to ensure that I deliver that, and then we let every other member of cabinet do their own parts.
What's the single biggest thing that you think needs to be done to drive the change required to make Nigeria a true tourism powerhouse?
So we have, the single change is, first of all, to put the infrastructure. I mean, it just sounds quite, it sounds banal at this point, because I keep on saying it. It's just the infrastructure, first and foremost. World-class infrastructure. And when I say world-class infrastructure, I'm talking about the power and the access, because you cannot ask someone to go to a destination when there are potholes on the road and there's no access there. The security has to be there, the access has to be there, the power, the water has to be there, and then the infrastructure, just the basic infrastructure for a site such as Obudu. So we're going to do that. We have a platform or an initiative that we launched in the creative industry, which is Destination 2030. And that was our soft power initiative, in where we want to leverage on the creativity and the interest that the world has in Nigeria to sort of reposition and sell Nigeria. And that is what we want to do with the tourism industry. So we are going to go international. We're going to sell Nigeria to the world. We're going to sell, if not Nigeria, for me, I'm going to sell those specific sites, and I will sell Nigeria from a creative industry.
And reassure people that they can go there.
To Obudu, and you're going to be safe. And then we want you to come to Nigeria, because we're going to have a calendar, a yearly calendar, that shows you what happens in, the Yawuri fishing festival. You've got the Calabar festival. You've got now Dirty December. You've got just so many things happening. We have the Motherland Initiative happening. So there's a lot happening year round. So the international community, of which at least 1 out of 8 black people in the world is of Nigerian descent, that may have an interest in coming into Nigeria, could come and experience Nigeria. And also an initiative whereby we are trying to, at the National Assembly now, to get a bill to allow citizenship by really investment, and where we are also going to have a diaspora city, which also falls into the tourism. And the diaspora city, Nigerians outside of the country that may not be Nigerian, that want to come and lay their roots here, will be able to do so through that initiative.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that you're clearly doing. Or trying to do. And
we are doing.
That you are doing and trying to do. But I mean, as I mentioned, you're the minister not just of tourism, but of arts, creative economy, culture, and so on. Of all the things that you're working on, what are the things that you think are that you're most excited about at the moment?
Honestly, I just am excited about...
I mean, I know you're going to say everything, but I mean...
No, but it is everything.
You must be more excited about some things more than others.
No, listen, I am really excited about everything, but I'm also very excited about leveraging on this beautiful content and this beautiful kaleidoscope of cultures that we have to see a resurgence for Nigeria. Tomorrow, we're going to announce the Abuja Creative City. Abuja Creative City, we're trying to use that to turn Nigeria, and of course the Wole Soyinka theatre, or creative city in Lagos, to turn Nigeria into the creative hub of Africa. And I think it should be. The culture is here, the creativity is here. So now we're going to give that, again, that trite term, the infrastructure. Once you put that in place, then you allow, and you see the tourism as well. So you have a creative city that is going to cater to those 49 subsectors in the industry.
Right.
But as it caters to that 49 subsectors by giving them the right training, the capacity building, it's going to be announced soon. Nollywood will be built. There will be a physical film studio, a Nollywood studio, and there will be a lot of creative hubs. We're going to have, there is just so much to do, but we're going to house almost everything in Lagos and in Abuja, in those creative cities. And I will make an announcement very soon with the partnership with the French government, whereby we will be able to deal or deliver on some of those infrastructure projects, and partnership with the Abu Dhabi government, who are interested in working with us in the building infrastructure for the creative industry, and the Saudi Arabian government that are interested in building infrastructure with us for the cultural industry. So,
very interesting indeed.
Yeah.
Keep us posted.
I will.
And we wish you the very best.
Thank you, Mr. Charles.
Hanatu Musawa is, of course, a barrister, but she's also the Minister of Art, Culture, Tourism, and the Creative Economy. Great to see you again.
Thank you.
And thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you so much.